I keep my ideals. The first words that we hear in the new My Hero Academia opening. But that word, ideals, a standard of perfection or a principle to be aimed at. Sound familiar to you guys? As soon as I watched this opening and I heard those words, I knew right away that there was much more going on here than we were seeing at face value. So today, we're gonna go through and pick apart this phenomenally intense piece of artwork and see if we can find what lies beneath the surface. Quick disclaimer though guys, this video will be filled with heavy amounts of manga spoilers, so if you haven't read at least past chapter 98 in the My Hero Academia manga, you should turn this video off immediately because you will be heavily spoiled. So now, without further ado, let's jump headfirst into this opening. So, we start off with Deku, who is inside of a literal spotlight, and this was intentional. All Might is about to be on his way out as a hero, and now it's Deku's turn to be the one on center stage. Then we are berated with images of some of Deku's most tragic and triumphant moments. We see Deku and his mom when she is trying to comfort him when he realizes that he doesn't have a quirk and that he can never achieve his dream of being like All Might. Then we see Deku when he tried to save Bakugo from the slime monster, even though he didn't have a quirk. He knew the dangers and consequences of his actions, but he still tried his hardest to save his friend. Which is the moment that he truly became a hero in my eyes. Next, we see the moment where Deku had finally decided to give up his dreams of becoming a hero. Luckily though, All Might sees something special inside of him and tells him that he can in fact be a hero. This was the moment where the path to his dreams first became achievable. Next, we see the moment where All Might finally acknowledges Deku and passes his quirk on to him. He has tested Deku and deemed him worthy enough to not only pass his quirk on to him, but deemed him worthy enough to entrust this boy with all of his ideals and dreams. After that, we see the moment where Deku gets his acceptance into UA after thinking that he had failed the entrance exam. He was ready to give up on his dreams once again, even after coming so far. Luckily though, All Might came in once again and was a shining ray of hope in Deku's life. Then we see Deku in his early days at UA when he first realizes that being a top hero won't be easy. He sees many other talented people with far more experience than him and learns about how sometimes in life, your greatest rivals can turn into your best friends. Then we go to the climax of his match with Todoroki, where he did everything possible in his power to make his hero proud of him. And in the course of doing that, became a hero to others in his own right. Then we see the moment during the fight with Hero Killer Stain, where Deku and the other students had their ideals tested, and they found out what it truly means to call yourself a hero. And finally, we see him working with his greatest frenemy to take on the very person that made them both want to be heroes to begin with. This was the moment when Deku's actual journey to be a hero skyrocketed. He took everything that he had been taught by his mentor up to that point and threw it right back at him full force, even at one point trying to challenge him as an equal. They say that a teacher's job is done when their student surpasses them. This will come up again later, so for now, let's just keep moving. The camera pans out and we see that Deku is in a mountain terrain type of area, which I'm convinced is the same place that he will go to try and save Kota, and you'll see why later on. The camera transitions and we see a younger version of All Might with his mentor and the previous holder of One for All, Nana Shimura, who is the grandmother of Shigaraki Tomura, the leader of the League of Villains. She not only hands One for All to him, but she also gives him the opportunity to make his dreams of becoming the pillar of hope for the entire world come true. This leads directly into a scene that has All Might and Deku sitting together on a bench. We're gonna skip this scene for right now, but we'll definitely come back to it later because this scene is very important. So moving on, we see the classes running through the forest area where the training camp will take place, and obviously where everything will go wrong. before we are greeted by Endeavor and a few other heroes, all of whom will be members of the Subjugation Squad later on in this upcoming arc. We see a bright blue flame, and then we are greeted by the members of the League of Villains, who will be the main antagonists of the conflict inside of the forest. I just want to point this out real quick. So, if you guys read the manga, then you already know about the theory of Dabi being Endeavor's son. And I don't know if there were just some artistic liberties taken here, but I find it very intriguing that both of these groups were introduced by these two in their respective flames. It's probably just a coincidence though. Then we see Best Girl Toga pop up on the screen, and after watching this opening nearly 150 times, I'm still not sure if the hearts that pop up on the screen are intentional, or if that she is just so much of a best girl that my brain imagines them. After that, we transition over to Shigaraki, who looks like he is completely depressed and is on the verge of giving everything up. Sort of like how Deku was back in the first opening until he met All Might. He is bowed down on the ground with his head pushed up to a computer screen that he always uses to talk to his mentor, All For One. Suddenly, All For One's hand reaches out and pats him on the head in a very loving manner, in the sort of way that a parent might try to do to console their sad child. Keep this thought in mind as you watch the rest of this opening. The next scene we get is of Deku walking along with a very grim look on his face as images of Bakugo play behind him. Deku is disappointed in himself for allowing his childhood friend to get kidnapped by the League of Villains right in front of his face. He thinks that he wasn't strong enough, and he feels that he also let all of his other classmates down who were fighting just as hard as he was, even though we all know that it's not his fault. But this time, instead of keeping his head down and crying about it, he instead decides to use this as a stepping stone to better himself and decides to power up and go save Bakugo. After all of the previous experiences he has went through, Deku now understands what you have to do to call yourself a true hero. The camera changes and we get this fantastic shot of All Might as he soars through the air and plummets down to the ground and completely decimates an entire city area, which is obviously the setting for the All For One versus One For All fight, which I can't wait to see because I remember just how amazing the manga chapters were. After that, we transition back over to Shigaraki, who is walking with an entire army of Nomu from the Nomu factory. Now, I want you guys to take a good look at him. The last time we saw him, he was in complete despair and on the verge of giving up. But now, look at all the confidence he is exuding. This scene blends into the next scene, where we see All For One waiting on top of a hill, which we can assume is where Shigaraki is theoretically heading towards. Basically, he is now walking in the footsteps of All For One, much like Deku is walking in the footsteps of All Might. The ideals of the mentors coincide with the ideals of the successors, and there'll be more conflicts and parallels of these four characters and their ideal as we look further into this opening. So now we go back to the forest area where the attack on the students has already began. At first, I thought that this was still the students training until I saw Deku versus Muscular. So the students are in the forest fighting for their lives against the League of Villains, and we see Deku fighting Muscular in the same mountain terrain from earlier as he charges up for his ultimate smash. Quick side note, I cannot wait to see the 1,000,000% smash animated, because I can just imagine how epic that's going to be. I really like the artistic choice of the opening to put all of the students in their hero outfits, because up until this point, the only time that they were in their hero outfits were for special occasions. So I think having them in their hero outfits, actually fighting real villains for their lives, hammers home the fact that these aren't children who are in school with the dream of becoming heroes any longer. From the moment they chose to fight instead of running away, they officially became heroes. They have all figured out what their ideals are, and they're ready to risk their lives for them. Now we finally hit the climax of this opening, and we see All For One waiting in the city as All Might crashes in and completely destroys the entire area. And I won't harp too much about the expression on All Might's face, which sent literal shivers down my spine, by the way. But instead, I want to talk about the song in the background that says, "I keep my ideals." This phrase is one of the most important lessons in this entire show. The reasons that the heroes fight, the reason the villains fight back. Everyone in this world has their own ideals, and it's important to keep those in your heart at all times so you always remember just what it is you're fighting for. The underlying message here, though, is that you have to be careful about who you look up to because their ideals can easily overtake you. We see not only the conflicting ideals of All for One and All Might, but we also see that those who will succeed them also have conflicting ideals. After that, we get shots of Aizawa, Best Jeanist, Mount Lady, and Kamui Woods, who will all be present for the All for One versus One for All fight, and end up being the ones who help All Might out in the end by rescuing all of the citizens who were in danger's way so that All Might could stop holding back and fight All for One at 100%. Then we see Endeavor, who is one of the most interesting characters in this story, and there's so many things that I want to say about him and his effect on this opening, but I'll save them all for another video just for time's sake. And then finally we get Deku, who comes in and breaks the wall, exposing the title, which I took at face value until I saw the final scene of this opening. For that though, we need to go back and look at Deku and All Might in all of the previous openings. So let's go back to opening 1. From the very beginning, we see Deku looking at All Might's back. The difference between the two is immeasurable. Deku is mesmerized by his radiance and longs to be like All Might. So, with a face full of desperation and desire, he stretches out his hand towards All Might, even though he knows that much like his dreams, it's impossible. At this moment, he is just someone idolizing something that he can never hope to be himself. Now let's look at opening 2. From the second this one opens up, we see Deku is standing on top of a building, but compared to before, he is standing with a face full of determination and confidence as he looks on at All Might, who is jumping from skyscrapers on the horizon. Deku has went from literal rock bottom to one of the top students in his class, and he is even starting to get recognized by others for his talents. But even though he has come so far, All Might is still out of his grasp. This time though, he is much closer to closing that gap. Deku is finally starting to catch up. He has met All Might, and he is even being trained by him, so he knows that one day, that dream of his will come true, which is why we see him smiling with the same smile that All Might often uses. Then we go to opening 3. Here we see Deku in his hero costume with a determined look on his face as he gets ready to fight. He is now able to go out and stand on his own and fight his own battles. Mostly at least. All Might descends from the sky and he lands right in front of Deku. Now, this is the first time in an opening that these two have been face to face with All Might actually looking at Deku. And you can tell just how happy it makes him if you look at that look on his face. And it's the same for All Might too though. He made the perfect choice when it came to picking out his successor. These two are one and the same, and the beginning of this opening really hammers that point home. They actually shake hands with each other. All Might is no longer looking at Deku as this helpless little student who he has to protect. All Might acknowledges Deku as his equal, and now the two are standing side by side as comrades. Now we can head back to this opening. But before we talk about that final scene, I want to go back to that scene that we skipped over earlier. Now, I have looked all over and driven myself absolutely insane trying to figure out where this scene came from. But after extensive research, it occurred to me that this scene never actually happened. Check this out. This is a Shonen Jump cover for chapter 96, the chapter where All Might officially retires after his fight with All for One. At first, I couldn't figure out why they made the change from this to this. until I read the quote that was on the cover. I wish that we could always sit and bask under the soft light filtering through the trees. Reading this melancholic quote and realizing what it meant was the saddest moment for me writing this script. This quote is from both of their points of view. Deku knows that All Might's time has officially ran out and that he will no longer be able to protect and shelter him, so he will have to step up and be the new symbol of peace. All Might knows that he has done everything in his power to protect the world, and now he has no choice but to leave everything in Deku's hands. Neither of them want to accept it, but they know they have to face fact that this is how things will be from now on. But even so, even if the whole world sees them this way, to one another, in their hearts, this is how they will always appear to one another. It's extremely bittersweet when you think about it. Deku has looked up to All Might for his entire life, and now that he is finally getting a chance to know him, he gets all of this responsibility thrust onto him. All Might had been searching for the perfect successor for his power, and shortly after meeting him, he is forced to throw all of his work onto his shoulders and has to hope that the things he has taught him thus far help him out in the long run. And as much as he wants to help him, he knows that that is no longer feasible. So now that we figured that out, let's go look at the final scene of the opening, where we have Deku and All Might. Do you guys notice anything different here? In all of the previous openings, we've seen Deku trying his hardest to catch up to All Might, but here it's different. Deku is actually standing in front of All Might and has his head turned away from him. All Might is seeing Deku's back for the first time. This isn't the same kid that we met back in opening 1. He is strong and confident in his decisions, and now is his time to surpass and protect All Might. And All Might now has no choice but to watch Deku from afar and cheer him on as his mentor, which is what All Might's goal was from the very beginning. The parallels between Shigaraki, Deku, and their mentors are heavily thrown in our face for this entire opening, which I'm sure is the reason that they chose the word ideals as a theme for this opening. Conflicting principles, forever engaged in battle, with no clear good or evil. No right, no wrong. Only those who have their ideals come to fruition, and those who have their ideals crushed. And with that, I think that this is the perfect time to stop and ask you guys, what do you think? Please be sure to leave your comments down below, which I'm sure some of you won't even hesitate to do. But remember this, I am a huge fan of this manga, just like you guys are, and I did very extensive research on this, but some things may have slipped through the cracks, so feel free to correct me down below, because I always appreciate constructive criticism. Tell me what you guys think about this opening. Is this your favorite Hero Aka opening? Is there anything that you can't wait to see animated? Guys, as always, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button, and always share the video because it helps out way more than you can possibly imagine. I hope that every one of you guys who have watched this video has enjoyed, and I hope you learned something useful. But yeah, anyways guys, until the next video, best wishes.